Peter answered him, Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you on water. Jesus said, Come. There's a scene in the film Moonlight, winner of the Academy Award for Best Picture several years ago, in which the main character learns to swim. If you haven't seen Moonlight yet, it's a story told in 3 acts. It follows Chiron, a young black man, through his childhood, his adolescence, and his young adulthood. In the first act, when Chiron is known as Little, we witness his difficult upbringing, from living in poverty with a mother who has a substance disorder. Little develops an unlikely bond with Juan, who, though he's a drug dealer, is more of a benevolent figure in Little's life than he knew for many. And he becomes a father figure. According to a critic, one of the most important scenes in the film comes when Juan teaches Chiron how to swim. The scene is superb visually because it perfectly encapsulates the life that Chiron is about to have. If he does not learn how to ride out the incoming waves, they will swallow him up whole and consume him. He has to learn to swim in order to face the challenges that are about to come his way. This scene is all the more remarkable when we learn a little bit about the background of the film's production. The young actor playing Little, Alex Hibbett, did not know how to swim. So Mahershala Ali, the actor playing Juan, is actually teaching a real swimming lesson as the cameras roll. Added to that, the cast and crew had to finish what had been meant for a 6-hour shoot in 90 minutes because of an oncoming storm. As Barry Jenkins, the director, said, we only had 9 takes of the scene because the storm was coming. Every single piece we needed, we got, but not a piece more. In the scene, Little walks into the shallow water of the ocean, and as he goes deeper, Juan gently cradles Little's head so that he can float on the surface of the water. And then Juan says, I got you. I got you, I promise. I'm not going to let you go. Basically, this is Little's spiritual baptism. Then Juan says, You're in the middle of the whole world, man. Juan wants to show Little how big and how free the world can be. That it's not only the poverty, hardship, and bullying that Little has known as a child. Juan then begins demonstrating a freestyle stroke and coaches Little through his first swim. We see Little swim on his own amidst the vastness of the ocean. But we also know that Juan is nearby, ready to help if needed. In the next scene, they're on the shore, and Juan says to Little, at some point, you're going to have to decide for yourself who you are going to be. So Peter got out of the boat, started walking on the water, and came toward Jesus. But when he noticed the strong wind, he became frightened and began to sink. He cried out, Lord, save me. Jesus immediately reached out his hand and caught him, saying, You have little faith, why did you doubt? The story is well known to many of us. After teaching 2 large crowds, Jesus went by himself to pray, while he sent his disciples out to go across the Sea of Galilee. There was a fierce storm, and they were battered by waves. In the morning, they saw a figure walking toward them on the water. They feared it was a ghost, for who else could do that? But it was Jesus who said to them, Take heart, it is I. Do not be afraid. Peter, either to test Jesus or perhaps caught up in the wonder of the moment, challenges Jesus to command him to come come to him. Jesus says, come. Although maybe he didn't mean for Peter to walk. Maybe he meant for him just to swim to him. But Peter begins to walk, just like Jesus. But his fear of the wind caused him to sink. He cries out for help, and Jesus rescues him. But he also chides him, lovingly, I believe, for his lack of faith. Now, we can either read this gospel story literally or metaphorically, but either way, the lesson is the same. When we believe in the greatness of God and in ourselves as God's children, we can accomplish the seemingly impossible. Now, I don't think Jesus needs us to walk physically on the water, but he does invite us to come and follow him into challenging situations. We have a choice. Like Juan says in Moonlight, at some point, you're going to have to decide for yourself who you're going to be. There's always something to be afraid of. But the important thing is to keep moving, to keep putting one foot in front of the other, to keep putting one arm in front of the other into the water. That's the best way to keep from sinking, to keep swimming. And if you ever feel like you can't keep going, remember that Jesus is there with open arms, and so are his followers here, the church. We're here to keep one another afloat. We don't have to make the journey alone, because we're stronger together. When Jesus tells his disciples to go to the other side of the sea without him, this is actually the first time in Matthew's gospel that Jesus sends his disciples out on a mission without him. Jesus made the disciples get into the boat and go on ahead to the other side. But Jesus does not send them out alone. They are with each other. Throughout the Gospels, Jesus always sends his disciples in pairs or groups. Community is vital to the movement Jesus started, and also the church that today seeks to follow him. Christianity is not a private faith between an individual and God. Rather, it is a communal religion. The disciples were sent together in the boat, and today God sends us together as a church. There is a reason why a church's main worship space is often called a nave, and why the vaulted ceilings of many churches, ours included, might resemble an upside-down boat. The 2nd century theologian Tertullian was one of the first Christians to describe the church as a ship. In his work on baptism, Tertullian wrote that today's episode, the disciples in the boat, represents their baptism. Baptism is the promise that we are never alone. Even when we're faced with storms and waves, God is there. And God has given us companions in this ship, the church. And together, we are sent out into the deep waters, into the middle of the world, so that we can share this story, this hope in word and in action. In today's lesson from the letter to the Romans, St. Paul writes, if you confess with your lips that Jesus is Lord, and you believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. To confess that Jesus is Lord is to confess that love is the most powerful force in the world and universe. Jesus is the sacrament, the sign of God's love in this world. To believe in our hearts that God raised Jesus from the dead is to believe that love never dies, that love will always live again. To call on the name of the Lord means to believe in the transforming power of love, to cultivate our capacities for loving ourselves and our neighbors, and to go out into the world and share that love. We get to decide who we are going to be. To follow Jesus is to decide that we're going to trust in the power of love. To decide to be people who are vulnerable, people who forgive, people who struggle for justice, people who hope, people who live by faith in God, in one another, and in ourselves. People who love. To decide to be people who love. And that's what we're doing here in baptism today, as we baptize Cameron and Collins. Their family is deciding for them to embark on this journey to be people of love. And then in time it'll be their decision on their own to decide if they're going to be people of love. It's not always easy. Sometimes we might feel like we're alone in a little fishing boat being battered by waves in the middle of a storm. But remember, we are never alone. We have one another. And we have Jesus, whose voice calls out, "Take heart, it is I. Do not be afraid." And there is Jesus, waiting for us as we learn to swim on these waters, these deep waters in the middle of the world. Jesus, who takes our head and cradles it above the water as we float and says, "I got you, I promise. I'm not going to let you go." Amen.